Oh yeah, the recording in progress.
Recording in progress.
Guys, all right. Hi guys. This is a podcast. You always want one of those. She's
You're really
let's
selling us here.
yeah, I'm really selling it here.
Really.
So welcome to Some Like the Hot Takes, a podcast hosted by me, Gavin Batowie, and
Me, Andrea and App.
I tried to just end it at me, so it's just hi, it's Gavin and me.
Oh no,
Right.
it's just you.
Right. Wait, hold on. I never considered something. So if like we named this podcast new podcast, jeez, you're gonna see that like lisp come a lot, by the way. But so wait, if this podcast is called like it's named after Some Like It Hot, who's the Jack Lemmon and who's the Tony Curtis of the two of us? Well, how about this? We'll let you decide, the viewer.
Throughout our podcast journey, you can decide.
Right. Well, who's the Jack? Who's the Tony Curtis? And you, dear viewer, you're the Marilyn Monroe. They can't see. They can't see what I'm doing.
Can't see. We're doing little hearts. We're drawing a little
for you,
heart.
audience. Okay, so Andrea, tell me a little about yourself.
So I'm a film student studying film at a university I will not name for sake of privacy. Been doing this a while. Kind of got a full ride to study film. Not to brag, let's brag.
You are bragging.
Also, they need to know we know what we're talking about. We are professionals. Totally.
Yeah,
I'm not
professionals.
spending. Yeah, no, it's fine. So I love film. My main focus in filmmaking is cinematography and directing. I've been doing this for a while. I love film analysis. I had a professor actually who told me I needed to start a film blog because I wrote an essay and she was like, you need to publish this, and I'm like, that seems like a lot of work, but I can hang out with a friend now and do a podcast about it. So look out.
Yeah. So I guess I'll do me. I'm Gavin, and I go to a high school. I'm a senior in high school that I also won't reveal the name of. And I'm a really passionate person when it comes to film. I also want to become a filmmaker, so that plans to be my major as well. But in that realm, I also do I write plays. I'm currently student directing a musical, whatever. It's a lot of just things I'm doing. And really, I've just had a passion for the arts and specifically film for a very long time. And I do a thing where oftentimes I ramble on about movies, and I've had people a lot of times say, oh, you should do a podcast. And I'm like, nah, that's lame. Who would I even know that'd be interested in talking about this kind of stuff? Failing to realize I already call my friend Andrea all the time. And these conversations last for 2 hours where we just talk about I don't know, like topics like the one we're about to discuss today for 2 hours. And then I'm like, why don't I have an incentive to do any of this? You know what I mean? So let's just have an incentive.
Yeah. So speaking of, what are we talking about today?
Today we'll be talking about movie musicals.
Ooh, hot topic.
Because this year it's a very interesting year for the Oscars, which is actually at the time we're recording this is tomorrow night. I'm very nervous.
We do not want a certain film to win any of its 13 Oscar nominations.
Right. And we'll be talking about that in a second, mind you. But it's very interesting this year because movie genres that it's strange. Two genres are very specific in the Oscars. One of which used to get a lot of nominations, and the other one barely gets any. And both have two major contenders this year specifically.
Yeah.
Well, yeah. So the one that didn't get a lot of representation usually, you have horror movies like The Substance.
Absolutely. Don't even get me started. Next episode.
Don't. So yeah, stay tuned. We're gonna be revealing that.
Stay tuned. See me rant about horror films.
Right, of course. Well, all right. So
it's either horror films or the Oscars got started with movie musicals. That was kind of their thing. Hollywood made a movie about Hollywood musicals. So I mean,
Broadway melody.
Exactly. So vaudeville has always kind of been a root, and then vaudeville influenced film, and here we are. And then
especially with the way sound works, where it's sound film came about after the inception of the Oscars around the same time, 1927.
Yeah.
So afterwards, musicals were oh yeah, obviously when we're doing sound films, all studios wanted to do them. So it's yeah, let's just all do musicals, and that led to a lot of musicals.
It's a safe bet because sound was expensive. And they knew musicals could draw people in.
Right. And in the 50s, what they did was they had roadshow releases where they take these movies on big, expensive tours, and these would be considered the big Oscar movies.
Yeah, that's how Bollywood got its start too.
Yeah, Ben-Hur would be up there. And that's
different topic.
Ben-Hur. The point is, big people, like people would flock to these epics, right? They're the blockbusters of their time, and that would be those big epic movies, and then also musicals, because you had like, My Fair Lady, Sound of Music, stuff like that. And then the 70s, eventually it was really unhip to do big Hollywood musicals. Yeah. That kind of died down, and you don't really see a lot of musicals, with the exception of I think Chicago.
Chicago did well. Les Mis did really well.
But Chicago was the only one to win Best Picture, I think. I could be wrong. Since
right, I think so.
We'll say I'm right, and if anyone in the comments wants to correct me, we're saying we're gonna block them immediately. We're gonna just deny.
First rule of politics is deny.
Fifth Amendment, y'all. We're gonna do Amendment.
Yeah.
And but point is, this year is interesting because 2 major Oscar contenders are musicals. One of which being Wicked Part 1, and the other one,
Emilia Perez.
Let's talk about it. Andrea, what do you know about this movie?
So, a cis French dude,
right,
is going to do a film about Mexico,
right,
starring a trans woman.
Okay.
Her story.
Now, on paper, I will add, I mean, like you said, like on paper, it could be like, oh, maybe he did a lot. You might be saying, oh, he probably did a lot of research on the topic.
No.
Probably no. Well, okay.
He flat out admitted in an interview he didn't do, and not even the songs aren't even good. You can hear the autotune from a mile away.
Right, and it's interesting because you hear that topic on paper, and your mind goes in a lot of different places, right? Mm-hmm. And you're like, oh, it's either A, pretty campy, right? And the film starts, and it kind of makes you think it's going to be pretty fun. In fact, the film originally was listed as a black comedy, right? It was very much listed as like, this is a comedic film, right? It has a lot of comedic elements, which on paper, it's like, okay, I could see how this is interesting, trying to play with the themes.
Falls like so flat though.
Right, because here's the thing. What interests me is, what I find especially fascinating, the director is on paper being like, he did an interview later on where he didn't understand why a lot of people felt the way they did, because he's like, nothing in my film is realistic. Nothing in this film is trying to, like, you know what I mean, like try to display anything real. On one hand, maybe I could understand that, like you're making a musical, right? So like, everything's kind of crazy, whatever.
Everything. Like, you can have the Breaking Bad Mexico orange tint because it's a musical. You can play around with colors like that.
And you can make everything look crazy, whatever. It's fine. But what gets me is the way that he says that. But also, it's very clear the film is trying to, quote, look like, okay, let's say the circumstances were different and everyone somehow loved this movie, right? Exactly as it is. And it said, oh, we love Emilia Perez. He would be on this press tour being like, this film, I think, is very realistic to what's going on in Mexico.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah. And then he also, I think it was him, I think he said that, like, the language of Mexico, like Spanish, is like the language of poverty or whatever, which is like really cool and awesome. Which is
he took maybe a single trip to Mexico.
Right. I mean,
but
like,
also, what bothers me is Mexican cartel violence is a very real problem, and yes, it is a problem Mexico's facing, but that's not their whole identity as a country. But like, very real people, very real families suffer from this. Identity that's not a joke, Jim. Kind of like that. Like, very real people suffer from this, and they're just like, oh, this person is gonna, like, change their gender, even though they really don't feel, I don't think, that connected to that gender, and then suddenly everything's okay, and then they're, spoiler alert, hailed as a martyr at the end of the film.
Right. And for me, look, I'm not Mexican, but I am Colombian, and the country of Colombia has a lot of different, like there's definitely stereotypes that go around about Colombia, right? The thing is, here's the thing. If a Colombian filmmaker wants to tell a story like this, right, and try to treat it in a somewhat maybe lighthearted fashion, I can maybe understand. But for someone, like, point is, nothing in the film works, because the idea is any idea that you can give it the benefit of the doubt of, like, well, maybe he should have view a different side of it. Maybe he should have having fun with it. It still comes off as very insensitive because it's Jacques Demy being whatever. By the way, we didn't even mention Carla Sofia Gascon's Twitter thing, and frankly, I don't want to.
No, actually. We're just gonna leave that for the other 50 million YouTubers talking about this film.
Of course, but last thing they need, right?
Yeah.
But last thing I want to say about it is we're not here discussing about that stuff. We're here to talk about it as a musical.
Yes.
Now, I watched this movie twice.
Twice? You did it to yourself twice?
Well, okay, technically 1.5, because Once I watched it and I gave up.
Okay.
Second
Like,
time,
why would you do that to yourself?
And then like in the second one, I was like Malcolm McDowell in A Clockwork Orange. I like strapped myself to the machine, eyes widened, and I'm like, stop, make it stop. But it was, listen, I don't like this movie, right?
No.
I mean, I joke with friends or whatever, like with you in private. I'm like, I hate this movie so much. At the end of the day, it somehow straddles the line. It's absurd and it's not really that interesting. It's just like
the plot is so weirdly paced.
It's weird.
And also, I think it's because none of the actual actors were native Spanish speakers, but the dialogue just felt so clunky and forced and not even very well directed. I mean, I haven't seen any of his other films to like compare how good of a
I actually have heard some of his films are pretty good. I heard like, what was the one called A Prophet? That one, like, I think it got nominated for an award. I heard there's a movie with John C. Reilly and I think Joaquin Phoenix called The Sister's Brother, where it's like a Western. I feel
like I've heard of that one.
I was previously interested in seeing that, but my thing is, I just think nothing in this film really works. And I think the major thing is the film simultaneously tries to be very cinematic, but it doesn't go all the way with anything it does. Like, it never truly, like, there's scenes where there might be a cool, interesting idea, but it's like, for example, there's a scene where they're in like a hospital, right? It's the famous. If you go on,
yeah. Man, woman, that one.
Yeah, we're not going to finish the line. Go on Twitter, see the line. It's funny. But point is, there's that scene could be interesting because it has some scenes like people in hospital beds. It could be interesting, maybe even have some funny elements. But the film's color is just so weird. It just does not work. It just, everything about it is like trying to be something, but it doesn't go all the way. And you just watch it and you're like, man. And there's some like music scenes where it's just like someone walking and talking. It's like, that's not cinematic.
You've heard me make fun of those kind of scenes on set. I hate those scenes.
Right. Like, it's in that you hate those kinds of scenes. But okay.
And also they have such a like amazing cast.
Sure, yeah.
Why didn't two issues? They didn't hire native Spanish speakers, and they wasted a star-studded cast. You can't win on both fronts.
Right, like, it just didn't work. It just didn't work, and I think a movie like this is really bad, and you should probably not see it. No. But given the Oscars, you might end up having to see it. Oh boy.
So, okay, pivoting from musicals everyone hates, and there's not really much defensible about it. Is there a musical that you love that a lot of people don't like?
Now, I'm going to put a pin in that for a minute, because I want to say, you hear us talk about this, and you might assume, oh, they hate musicals. Wrong. We really like movie musicals.
Oh, absolutely. In fact, we were theater kids.
Right, we're theater kids. And in fact, I'll argue, in some cases, movie musicals might be better. And here's the thing. A lot of people give movie musicals a bad rap. Specifically people who can afford to go to New York every month, right? To go see something on Broadway. They'll say, oh, movie musicals is not the real thing. Here's what I think is interesting. For example, my camera's not on, but I'm recording this in my room. Over there is my soundtrack copy of West Side Story, the 1960s movie. And that's a really great movie. But think about it. When you think of West Side Story, you might go see a show of it or whatever. You're always going to think of Rita Moreno. You're always going to think of her because of the movie.
And like the balcony staircase scene, not the balcony, but like that staircase scene, like, it's really in the way it's shot. It's so iconic that you really always think of it like that. And you can get more personal with the characters and get some of the more nuances in the performance you can't quite get on a stage, because you have to project. You have to make it visible to everyone in the audience. So you can lose some of that nuance where movie musicals, if done correctly, can bring it back.
Right. And another thing is, but also it could add an element to it that wasn't always there. Like, for example, there's a couple of scenes in West Side Story specifically where what's notable about it is it's actually directed by two people, technically, Jerome Robbins and Robert Wise. Jerome Robbins was the choreographer. His job was the dance, and obviously he does a great job.
Obviously.
And that those dances could be in anything. Let's say, as an example, let's use In America, right? Let's use In America as an example. Those dances, those can all be on stage, technically. That's Jerome Robbins' part. That's him doing the musical. Robert Wise has a long history in Hollywood. Before becoming a director, he actually, fun fact, was an editor on Citizen Kane. So man knew how to make a movie.
Oh, yeah.
Man knew how a film was paced, how to move a scene. And he went on to do like a bunch of different, like The Day the Earth Stood Still, which is an incredible sci-fi.
Oh, yeah.
Have you seen that?
Yeah.
it's incredible.
So
It's
good.
so good, so fun. And those movies were his like forte until he did West Side Story, which basically, first of all, shot in Technicolor, which is just makes these colors pop and everything.
It's such a great example of like earlier color.
Right, yeah. But to me, what it comes down to is the amount of patience he has, and there's something about West Side Story specifically, which just shows the fun of Hollywood musicals because it's so precise. Like a guy like Robert Wise, you see the way he moves the camera just enough, and it's not like a sense of just enough that it's like, like he's not trying to like compare it to like the later Spielberg.
Yeah, I've
like,
not seen the later one. I've only seen the original.
I've seen like a lot of the dance scenes for this podcast specifically. I wanted to sit down and watch at least like a lot of the musical numbers to take this opinion with a grain of salt. But a lot of great decisions made by Spielberg with the camera and everything, just being insanely creative. But Robert Wise, it's the little things. It's the way he's able to shoot the scene. It's the way he's able to add this extra level of like detail, because it still feels like a musical.
Yeah,
like
absolutely.
But it's that level of cinematic depth that he gets.
It's the restraint. I love seeing restraint in filmmakers. I know this isn't a musical, so a little side tangent, but Chernobyl, HBO miniseries, is a great example of filmmakers showing restraint, because it really, and that's also kind of the issue with a lot of newer movie musicals, is they want to show the big, grand spectacle, wide shots, huge extras, a lot of PD going on, and they want to show everything because they can.
And nothing wrong with that.
Nothing wrong with that. There is a time and a place for it. Like Wonka came out, and I mean, I liked it. I like it. It was a good musical.
I haven't still seen it.
It was pretty good. And it has some of those bigger wide shots, but it's such a childlike glee in those moments that the wide shots work. But I really like when a filmmaker can say, even though I have the means to do this big crane shot, I don't want to. I want to show like a little precise, intricate moments with the camera. And almost as a dancer myself, like seeing the camera choreographed with the dancers is something I always love to see in movie musicals. And the way, like White Christmas is a great example of how they film their dance scenes. And like you see, they did it all like in really long takes. Besides the point. Like I love to see that kind of restraint and that kind of control, because it really shows a director who was an editor who knows their craft. They know. I mean, I've done it before too. I like when we did the film called The Hot Seat, we were like, we were like so wide-eyed. We kind of went crazy big because we could. It was our first. Because you could,
and it was short. You have to kind of. By the way, brief context. We went to a video institute where we had to make a short film, and could you still? Sorry.
Yeah.
So we had to do a film at a video institute, and it was a short movie, and we were all like, let's just throw caution to wind, just throw ideas, and that's the way that works. But in a film musical setting where you have an intermission, everything, you got to space some of that out, some of that interesting filmmaking ideas for certain scenes.
Yeah. Like Sound of Music. That's my personal favorite movie musical.
Robert Wise as well. That's another Robert Wise. And I think, and personally, of the two, we can have this discussion, but I think I'm personally Team West Side. There's a lot to like
Sound of Music.
I think Sound of Music is really charming, but I feel like in terms of filmmaking, I think that's
absolutely. I would agree with you on that.
In terms of his like the vision here, I think Robert Wise. Here's the thing. My thing is, I think Robert Wise needs Jerome Robbins. I think Sound of Music has some great scenes, but I don't really think of it as like a dancing musical necessarily.
No, it's a more contemplative musicals.
It's more of a like Julie Andrews,
like
charming and sweet. It's a Julie Andrews movie first, and then a musical second.
Yeah, I just love that movie. It's one of those movies you turn it on, except for the scene in the end where they're hiding from the Nazis. That gets me every single time.
Yeah, can you imagine being the one person like, actually, that was my favorite part? It was like,
all right. But just like it's one of those movies that instantly makes me feel like comforted, and also as a huge historical nerd, like I love the way like you get more appreciation for it as you learn more about the history of the time. But I just love the way Sound of Music, like it's such a kind of a character piece, but also still an ensemble piece. And I love seeing like the growth of this character. Anyways, we don't have that much time for a tangent.
Not that much time.
That much time.
But let's look at the flip side, right? You have Robert Wise, right? This character, this director who just kind of keeps things restrained. However, the exact opposite of that is really cool too. And that's what I'm talking about. People like Gene Kelly musicals, the really fun ones.
Yes.
let's talk let's talk Singin' in the Rain,
Oh,
because
absolutely.
so Singin' in the Rain, directed by Stanley Donen and Gene Kelly in I think 1952.
Yes.
It's a movie musical that so it's funny that we're mentioning movie musicals specifically, because I think an interesting way of looking at this is we're looking at adaptations of stage shows. Singin' in the Rain was made for the movies.
And then later adapted into a stage show.
Right. But here's the thing. When I think of Singin' in the Rain, to me, there are some scenes that you can only do in movies. Like, maybe you can capture some of the feeling of the Singin' in the Rain sequence of Gene Kelly in the Rain if you're a sadist and you want to try to flood a theater. But
I'm actually in a production on a film crew for Singin' in the Rain that will have water on stage.
Oh, no.
I don't know how they're doing it. I'm just on the film crew.
Oh my God.
I'm just on the film crew for like the dueling and dancing cavalier scenes.
Oh, wow.
So I don't know how the heck they're gonna do that, but that's funny you mentioned, because that's what they're planning on doing.
Well, there you go. Where there's some synergy there. But
Yeah.
I think but like there's scenes. Okay, perfect example, La La Land, right?
Oh yeah, they're making
I think
a
a lot
Broadway show. Like you
Right.
can't.
But okay, first off, right off the bat, Another Day of Sun, right? That number.
Okay.
How can you do that without, to me, the original feeling of the same way theater kids look at like certain things on stage, not coming to movies. To me, when it comes to movies, it's like the opening shot where it's going from car to car, the energy just moving, gliding through a crowded highway.
Yes, and
it's impossible to capture that.
It has also that West Side Story Technicolor, those very vivid pops. I mean, this is a film that pays homage to classical Hollywood and things like that. And also just like the planetarium scene. Like, how are you gonna, because the way it's edited, the way it's shot, how, like, you could maybe do, I don't know what it's called, I've only seen this film like once or twice, but the one where she's in the yellow dress and it's a tap scene, and it's like purple sky. You can kind of do that one on a stage.
You can maybe do that one, but there's some scenes in that you like hard.
And like, this is a love letter, like Singing in the Rain, it's a love letter to film.
Right.
So how can you do that on stage?
But you could, but there's certain
but I feel like you're gonna lose it.
You're gonna lose some of the magic.
We're looking on the flip side of that. My favorite stage musical is Hadestown. I would love to see. They are doing a recorded, like Hamilton recorded stage version, but if they were to do a full movie musical, I feel like it wouldn't work. Because the whole point is these live performers are going to sing it again and again and again, even though they always know the tragedy at the end of the story of Orpheus and Eurydice. Like, that's kind of the beauty of theater. That's because...
Yeah, spoilers, by the way.
Spoilers. It's Orpheus and Eurydice, come on. It's like Sixth Sense. If it's like Sixth Sense, if you haven't seen it by now, that's your fault.
Yeah, it's your fault.
Like,
yeah, let's blame the audience for not knowing.
You know what? Dead people. Anyway, like...
Guys, Bruce Willis is...
Oh my god.
Oh god.
But like, you guys get what I'm saying. Like, Broadway musicals and movie musicals, I feel like it's apples and oranges. Like, they're both musicals, but at the end of the day, like, they're different mediums. That's why I feel like anymore why movie musical has kind of gotten a bad rap, because like the newer ones, like Dear Evan Hansen, Cats.
We're not even talking about Cats.
No, Les Mis.
Not on my podcast.
Not on my podcast. Like, some of these newer movie musicals that haven't done so well, Wicked being the exception, is like they were stage shows for like decades and decades and decades. And things are gonna change. Cats, it's like, why would you do that? Les Mis, it was bad casting choices.
Which we're gonna get, which actually, that is interesting, because we talk about movie musicals, right? And we think about who we want in certain roles. And that brings us to the topic of musicals where people can't sing. Which I tell this opinion to people, and it's a weird thing I always have, where it's like, sometimes I like watching a movie musical where it's like someone who doesn't really know how to sing very well. Like, I remember talking to somebody who was more like into musicals than I was and knows more about it. And they said, oh no, the singing in Singin' in the Rain isn't that good. And I'm like, really? And they went into it, and I'm like, they tell me all these things, and I'm like, oh, interesting. But that doesn't derive my enjoyment of any of it.
Okay.
Because it's still, the glee is there. And you see that in like other movie musicals, like Everyone Says I Love You and stuff like that.
Yeah.
There are musicals where it's people who can't really sing, but there's some sort of joy in that. Les Mis, on the other hand.
I mean, there's not much joy in that show anyway.
Yeah.
Les Miserables, I have read the original book, and I love the original Broadway. The soundtrack, I love the story. It's great.
I've only seen the movie, so take that with it. Take my whole opinion with it.
Pretty much the same thing, just make the acting worse.
Shout out to my boy Russell Crowe for giving. Yes,
Shout
give me
out
nothing.
To Russell
Yes.
Crowe. Shout out to Russell Crowe.
Die.
24601. What is that opening scene?
Oh, you to the day you die.
That opening scene of Les Mis cracks me up.
Which Hugh Jackman also does not.
No. Like, okay,
no.
give what's her name? She plays Fontaine. Give Anne Hathaway the Oscar for that one.
She did. She got an Oscar.
Yeah, she got that one. Like, she deserves that.
Yeah, she's good.
She deserves that. Eddie Redmayne, he's great. Love him. He's great.
Hey, you know who directed that? Tom Hooper. You want to know what else Tom Hooper directed? Cats.
No, dude, they were the same director? I did not know that.
Yeah, Tom Hooper. Yeah, Tom Hooper directed both those, bro.
That kind of explains a lot.
That explains a lot.
That explains a lot.
Yeah,
I mean, like,
apparently, yeah.
I mean, like, Do You Hear the People Sing is, like, I think one of the most iconic songs in Broadway history.
Oh, sure.
Kind of making a resurgence now.
Yeah.
Same with Cabaret. But it could have actually been, because you can't necessarily show the scale of the French Revolution on a Broadway stage.
Yeah. So you would expect a movie could actually do that. You had
the opportunity here to do that, and you didn't.
You messed it up.
You messed it up. Like, then you're like, obviously, like, Les Mis is an adaptation of Victor Hugo's novel, so obviously it has to cut out a lot. But what it cuts out, it supplements with the music that tells you a lot of that anyway. And you have this Fontaine's, like, peak. The peak of her character is when she is forced to sleep with other men for money. But the way that scene was directed, I get, like, they're trying to show, like, the chaos of she's trying to make money for her daughter and she's going every which way.
Right.
But what was that scene? What was it? Like,
I don't know what it is. Where's the
like
map?
You get to, like, I get, like, the music slows down and, like, she sees the man walking up to the ship and she knows what she's gonna have to do.
Which, in theory, like, that's not bad. Like, it's not bad to be, like, subtle about it. But with Tom Hooper, there's no subtlety.
There is no subtlety, and she's like, the camera's, like, literally shaky. Like, it's the most film school thing. It's a shaky camera to show her unstable mental. Blah 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 blah.
It's just, you wish you'd show it in a more interesting way. That's all.
And also, I wish they would show the barricade better, because that's like a very Javert's suicide. That is a turning point in the play.
Right.
And you just have Russell Crowe. They reused the same location for Javert's 2 songs. You couldn't even change the location. You couldn't even change the shot list.
Maybe he was only paid to show up for a couple of days. Like, I am not leaving here.
You know what? Probably they just filmed all of his scenes back to back. Set up the same green screen setup.
Yeah, get that gladiator money, bro. I like
that. Get that gladiator money.
That gladiator money.
Are you not I am not entertained.
I'm not entertained.
Russell Crowe. I'm not entertained.
Russell, I'm not entertained. Well, actually, I think I'm more entertained by him. Actually, I love him in that movie. Okay, I say what you will about that movie and him in it. I think he's really bad. He's my favorite part of that movie because
Gladiator.
Just because of the way he sings. Like that's bad funny to me. That's bad funny to me. But
it's a bad funny. But like, I get, like, maybe they're in the same location because he's still, like, the Palace of Justice.
Right.
The shot list is exactly the same.
Right. But I think, okay, so I'm trying to move it to maybe more positive territory, right?
Oh, yeah.
Because remember, the whole point of this is in defense.
I know.
We're trying to defend, but
it's like one of the best musicals ever. And this is the movie we get.
But let's talk about something specific. Movie musicals that are exclusively movies. For example, a movie I'm bringing up because it's one of my favorites. Okay, so the Coen brothers are my favorite filmmakers. They made films like Fargo, Big Lebowski, No Country for Old Men. They make such unique, sardonic little tales that are darkly funny and have really fun philosophical undertones in everything they do. Mm-hmm. And one of my favorite movies they ever did was a comedy called Oh Brother, Where Art Thou? That movie is an adaptation of Homer's Odyssey, which is like, oh, okay, how did they adapt it? They adapted Homer's Odyssey for it to be a southern, it's set in, like, Southern America during the Great Depression. and it's a movie musical that uses like the jukebox musical that has old music, like old 30s blues music, and it's really great. And it stars George Clooney, a lot of great people involved in it. And what I love about it so much is that it's a movie very much of its time. It's a movie that very much, it doesn't have big dance sequences, but the songs come very naturally. Like the songs come in very small moments. It's not very like theatrical. It's not very much like an actual like musical in that sense. It's a normal road comedy, but it has these little glimpses of music. And when I think about it, it's like, no, this is a musical. Like it very much uses the music and it adds a sense of atmosphere that it wouldn't have had. But it's so cinematic. Like it's shot by the great cinematographer Roger Deakins, and it's one of the first.
Robert Deakins.
Love Roger Deakins, but it's actually interesting because it's one of the first movies to ever digitally colorize the film. It's one of the first.
Yeah, this was early 2000s, right?
Yeah, I think it was 2000, 2001.
Oh, yeah, so that's like in that Sin City era of we're going to push digital to the limits.
Yeah, but that was right before that hit.
And that was when Moulin Rouge came out, which is also another very famous jukebox musical, which is also one of my favorite musicals. But yeah,
but Baz Luhrmann episode coming by because we have some thoughts. We have some things to say. we have some things to say. But so, O Brother, Where Art Thou, really great. I love it so much because of the way in which like it's able to depict its story in so many different ways. Like it's really funny. It's got a great like ensemble cast, but to me, it's the way the music coincides with the story in ways that enunciate the funnier elements of it, and just it very much is one of the few movies that genuinely feels like you're listening to a tall tale being told to you. It's very fun, and it's a really fun adaptation. It's just really creative, but the music is actually really interesting because it actually won a Grammy Grammy, like best recorded album or whatever, because the soundtrack
did they re-record it for?
They did re-record music tracks.
Okay.
Yeah. So it won like best album. Someone could probably look this up again. Yeah. Tell me in the comments if I'm wrong.
Viewer engagement.
Viewer engagement, y'all. But no, like it's really great, and its influence shows in spades. And Andrea should watch it.
I know. I'm a huge Odyssey fan. Epic the Musical had me crying on Christmas Eve, but I know I haven't had time, and I want to watch it because George Clooney in the early 2000s. You gotta say more, but
okay. So we have a couple other musicals we want to talk about in addition, but how I came up with the idea of doing the first episode being a musical episode was because I mentioned a movie to Andrea in a private conversation, and I never expected in a million years she would have seen it. I was on Tubi, right? Because, you know, real ones know Tubi's the GOAT, right? Real ones. And I was watching a movie, a little movie directed by Stanley Donen, as previously mentioned, called Seven Brides for Seven Brothers. And I said, Andrea, this movie's crazy. Like, it does not age well at all. And then she says,
I freaking love this movie.
She says she loves the movie.
For my senior thesis project in high school, I did an entire film analysis on this film, how Millie Pompati is the GOAT. She is the female feminist icon GOAT.
Okay, take it away.
Is this film questionable?
Yes.
For summary. So, it's about 7 girls who marry 7 brothers. Wow.
Dang.
So, yeah, basically, it's like kind of like Frontier, Civil War. This guy's just getting back from battle, and he's like, hey, I'm the oldest brother. I need a wife. So he meets this girl, and then they agreed to get married. Right. And she moves in with him up to his farm. And then on the farm, it's like an isolated piece of land. And then there are 6 other brothers who are also single. She basically whips their butts in the gear and says, if you have me married, if I'm married into this family, I'm going to keep a good home. So she she teaches these boys manners, how to actually flirt with girls. That's some of the best dance scenes I have ever seen in a movie.
Oh, them building the house.
Yes, the barn raising competition.
The barn raising's really
But anyways, the other brothers are like, hey, being single sucks.
This stinks, dude.
So then the oldest brother's like, hey, there's a verse in the Bible. Did you hear about those Sodom women? And yeah, so they go to town.
That whole thing sounds like a South Park bit. Like if you just this whole
episode where these brothers go to town, kidnap the first 6 of the girls they see, bring them back to the farm and go, oh crap, we forgot the priest.
Oh no.
And then
that's
Millie,
the only problem with this whole plan.
only problem. And then like they also shot like the mountains, like the snow covered them in, so like they're trapped there for the entire winter. So,
Which
like,
is crazy. I was watching this, I was like, oh my god, like how is there actually like suspense action scenes in this?
I know.
It's crazy.
So,
it's like,
and it's like the boy's like, we're not gonna hurt you, we just want to marry you. And they're all like, no. So Millie takes him in and she basically she stands up to her husband. A woman in a movie made in the 40s, 50s stands up to her husband, tells him off, makes all of the boys go sleep in the barn and be like, no, the house is for the girls. And then eventually, Stockholm Syndrome sets in, and then the girls do this beautiful ballet dance scene about how, you know what, the men aren't so nice. They kind of had a crush on him anyway during the barn raising scene I mentioned earlier. And then
right.
once the kid...
It's very gray.
Once the shock of the kidnapping wore off, they're like, you know what? So then, like, they all start, but the oldest brother, who's the first husband, is Adam, is like, my wife stood up to me. My fragile masculinity can't deal with that. So he goes up to an even more remote cabin in the woods and leaves Millie with her baby, which she is pregnant with. She married the worst brother for real. I digress.
All right, so let's talk about
anyway.
my experience with it. I watched.
They get married and it all works out.
Yeah, so I watched this movie and I was very much interested by the premise because I was like, how is this like gonna work? I watched it and I didn't have a lot of this information. I was interested in your take on it because I watched it and a part of me was like, seeing it at face value, right? And it's very easy to look at this film at face value.
Yeah.
And let me say this, every opinion about this movie is correct. Every single one.
Yeah.
The most negative and the most positive.
Yeah.
All correct. All of them are right. And I watched it and a part of me saw it and I was like, this is so campy and this is so ridiculous. Like, okay, the scene with the priest is brilliant to me because it's like that scene kind of turns something on my brain where I was like, it kind of turned my brain off a little bit because I'm like, oh, so maybe this whole thing, okay, it's so ridiculously at face value misogynistic that you watch it and you are like, wait, is this all a joke? I think this movie feels like a bit. It is all a big bit.
It's all a bit.
Right. But like, here's the thing. I think if you watch this movie and you kind of walk away with it, kind of like, I don't think this movie aged very well. Yeah, that's an okay opinion to have. But I do think there's a lot of good things in this movie, like, separated from that. I think it looks very pretty. I think the songs are good.
They're okay.
The songs are good.
It's the dance sequences for me that really...
It's the dances that are very good.
And also all the brothers kind of get a color. So that's also kind of helpful, because I don't remember the brothers' names, despite my many times seeing this movie.
Right, she grew up with this movie. But for me, I guess, okay, so if there's any standout here, let me make sure I'm getting this actress's name right. Is it Jane Powell?
Jane Powell. Yeah.
She's magnificent.
She's
so good in this movie.
It's this hilarious scene where, like, she comes in, like, to collect the boys' laundry. And she's while they're sleeping, and she's like, don't make me come in there. And they're like, look at each other like, she wouldn't. And she just marches right in there. And it's so like, oh yes, I would. She comes in. And it's really funny because like you jump cut and all these boys are like shivering and she's still like making them coffee. And I just like you said earlier, yeah, face value is kind of misogynistic, especially kind of by today's standards.
Right.
To that, I'd say 2 points. There's no blackface in this musical, which is kind of shocking for musical at this time.
You know what's interesting? I feel like we didn't. It's so funny, with the exception of. I mean, do you want to consider White Christmas like a with that one scene? I don't know. I mean,
with the minstrel show scene. I mean.
Yeah. I mean, okay. Point is, we were good. Okay, before talking about this, we were gonna mention Holiday Inn, but I don't like Holiday Inn.
No.
And I don't mess with that, so we're not gonna bring it up.
Yeah.
But surprisingly, I think we mentioned the movie musicals that have the least amount of stuff in them.
Yeah.
Because I think that's a problem, especially with Hollywood musicals. You watch those, and
the early Hollywood musicals.
Yeah.
Ooh.
Like this is how watching one of those go. You sit down and you're like, you're in heaven. You're like, heck yeah, like this is the greatest thing. And then all of a sudden, it's just like big bold letters, just racism, like right at your face.
Yeah, but this one is a musical for the time that does not have any racism.
Right,
like
that's misogyny.
Like it's set out west, and they never say anything derogatory towards Native Americans or anything like that.
Right,
but
which is a shocker. Right.
I still don't even think. Yes, it's misogynistic value, but in the way they wrote, I know, but that's main people's issue with this musical. But the way they wrote Millie Pompatine, she stands up to her husband. She
Right.
gains the respect of the rest of the brothers, not because like they have to respect her. She's a woman in the 50s, or I guess in the 1830s when this movie is set.
Which still, I still think the point still stands
Yeah.
true as the when it was made.
And she gains their respect.
Right.
And,
And I
like,
think
when
it's an interesting way of looking at it.
And when she stands up to her husband, like she's like, I'm gonna protect these girls. She's a girl's girl. Like, I'm gonna protect these women, and she stands like this massive. That dude's tall. If you watch the movie, and she's like not moving.
No,
and like
not really.
she gains the respect of everyone. And she also is so well spoken, so sure spoken. She is very stubborn, but she's also very compassionate. Like, she's like, oh, these boys, like, yeah, they don't kidnap women, but she's like, they've kind of been raised out in a farm, and so she like takes pity on them and like teaches them how to dance, teaches them how to flirt with women, and like, and she's even like disappointed when like she says, hey, don't start a fight. They start a fight, and she's like disappointed in them. She gives the I'm not mad speech, but she's still like icing their knuckles and things like that. So I feel like with Seven Brides for Seven Brothers, I feel like with Letterboxd and like that, people like write their reviews, but sometimes like people will just like hear the reviews and hear
Just the description underneath the movie.
and like they'll pass it off as, oh, this is misogynist, this is racist, which a lot of these old movies kind of are. Some of them not even kind of, they are.
They are like,
But
okay,
this one is-
Holiday Inn. Don't watch Holiday Inn. Fun advice from this.
I-
This is the some like the hot takes pledge. Don't watch Holiday Inn.
Yeah.
You'll have a bad time. That's my pledge.
Watch White Christmas, which is basically the brainchild of Holiday Inn. That is so
Watch
much
any
better.
other Danny Kaye movie.
Watch any other Danny Kaye movie.
Watch The Court Jester. I don't care. Watch one of those. Like,
Yeah.
I don't care.
But I feel like that's like with old movies, like people just write them off as like, oh, we don't make movies like that anymore.
Right. And you know what? They should make
And you
more.
know what? Circles back to Amelia Perez. We still make racist movies, but
Yeah. Well, you don't want to talk.
full circle.
Yeah, full circle. But I really quick want to mention your favorite music. Okay, let's talk about this. Favorite musical. Would it be Sound of Music for you?
Depends if we're talking Broadway or movie musical.
Let's say movie musical. Let's end that question.
Then
with you.
Sound of Music.
Sound of Music. I want to mention, lastly, a movie musical that, if pressed, I think if there's any movie musical that shows the worth of the medium, it's got to be Umbrellas of Cherbourg. I don't know if I'm
I
pronouncing
have
that
never
right.
seen that.
So, okay, directed by Jacques Demy, one of the filmmakers of the French New Wave movement, which
Okay.
shepherded people like Jean-Luc Godard, François Truffaut, Agnes Varda, all these people.
And then even like more recently, the director of The Substance,
Right.
Caroline Forgot.
Yeah, that's basically French New Wave led to those people.
Mhm.
And all filmmakers are derived from those people. Jacques Demy is interesting because out of all those filmmakers, a lot of them were influenced by people like Vincent Minnelli, father of Liza Minnelli, and Stanley Donen in these musicals, right? But what's interesting is that was Jacques Demy. Other filmmakers like Jean-Luc Godard took a lot from like John Huston, like John Huston, like Humphrey Bogart movies, people like that. But Demy was all about musicals, and he made musicals like Young Girls of Rochefort and this one, which I think is maybe my favorite movie musical, and it's the movie that commonly known as today, the movie that inspired La La Land. And you watch that movie, it's a very similar plot. The movie is about two lovers, and one of them's in an umbrella shop, and they fall in love, and it's like Les Mis, where they all talk to, like, all the dialogue is singing.
Mm-hmm.
Right? He works in a car factory.
Opera light.
Right. But in the middle of the movie, he goes to war.
Okay.
He comes back, and I'm not going to spoil it because I really want.
I haven't seen this, and I want to see it.
I'm going to spoil it, but he goes to war, and he comes back. Everything's different, and the question then becomes, can they still retain their relationship? That's the movie.
Interesting.
Right? That's the movie.
And since this is a French New Wave, I'm gonna assume World War One, right?
I think it's World War II. I think I could be wrong. I have not seen this movie in like 2 years, right?
Okay.
But it is a war.
But either way, it gets into like PTSD.
His point is the war is not that as important as this relationship, as the love between these two people, and the way it shifts because of young love, right?
Interesting.
This movie has such an incredible score. First off, an incredible, just powerful score, and the acting between the two leads. But what I think is so amazing about this movie is its use of color.
I love when movies do that.
You start at the beginning and it's like nighttime. They're just walking around and it's these, like, all these dark blue hues, yellows, pinks, just the pinks of the umbrella shop, just color and the idea of just these two rays of sunshine in just a pop art version of France. Like, it's really amazing the way the color in this looks, and it looks so like it's so it pops. It really does pop. All the colors just like mesh, and they just really just stand out, and everything about it is just so colorful and imaginative. You feel like you're watching a dream, like a lovely dream where it's coloring your perception. But then there's the moment where he leaves for war, and you're in the train station with him. You have some of the color, and it's my favorite moment in the movie because it's just two long shots for me. It's one of him just like getting up as she like doesn't know what to do. She hugs him in the train station as the music just slows down, and they go outside. He's on the train going one way, the camera's going with it, and you're outside all gray for the only time, only major time in the movie, all gray. The color, the fantasy is gone. It's just the color. And it never does anything big. It never does anything major.
It's the restrained filmmaking.
Right. But it's so, it pops so much. And the music just swells. And here's the thing. I love movies. I get really emotionally invested in movies. But I don't cry a lot at movies. And I didn't necessarily cry, but I felt so like emotion. Like no movie musical has ever emotionally like hit me like this. And it really is just the mix of the music and the color and the filmmaking. Like every part of this movie is incredible to me, because as much as, you know, you look at a movie like, okay, not a movie, but like going back to like the idea of romantic stories and musicals, the idea of something like young love, like Romeo and Juliet or whatever, doesn't really, young romance thing doesn't really connect with me. But the way this movie treats it as the most important thing in the world, and through the colors and the imagination of the music, you're able to connect with it in that way. And for that to be taken away in just like the grays, it really works. And it's a really just wonderful movie. And that's probably my favorite movie musical. Really great. Check it out.
So if we were to wrap this up, if we were to say our one little TLDR in defense of musicals, what is your like last like elevator pitch in defense of musicals?
My elevator pitch is basically, I think movie musicals, like any genre of movie, I feel as if is a genre that I feel as if the conventions of film is like any other tool. I'd argue film and theater have both its benefits. But I feel as if when it really comes down to it, movies have so many tools and unique ideas that I feel like for a good movie musical, to take advantage of those tools is really necessary. What would you say?
I was similar to that, where movie musicals, you have to suspend your disbelief a lot more than regular movies, which allows them to be a great avenue for filmmakers to really push the boundaries.
Right.
And by pushing the boundaries, that's how you discover new types of filmmaking. That's how directors find their style. It allows, and Hollywood owes so much to the original musical genre, because that's what modern Hollywood was built on. It's what the Oscars were built on. So I feel like people owe so much to movie musicals, and they don't even realize it.
So I guess what we're really saying is Nora should totally win Best Picture instead of Perez. And but yeah, so that's pretty much it. What are we doing next time?
Next time, we touched on it earlier, but we're going to do a beginner's guide to horror, recommending what you should watch if you are just getting into horror, or if you've been in the horror genre for a while, looking back on the films that got you into horror. Right,
because it's interesting because Andrea, as we're going to find out in that episode, grew up very much drenched in blood, as it were. Like she
not
like she like she was like the Brood. She was like swinging an axe or whatever. Like, you know. But for me, I grew up very much afraid of horror movies. The idea of horror and was like just like, oh, I don't want to do it. Well, not until like 5 or so years ago when I started getting more into movies around like middle school periods. I finally opened myself up to it, and I found a lot of interesting stuff. And we hope that next time, similar to musicals, we're able to tell you a little bit more about horror and how it could do a lot more.
And how it should be more included in the Oscars. Because of Substance and Nosferatu, my two favorite horror movies, not of this year, period, get snubbed, I'm gonna be real mad. You know they will.
But luckily,
I'm gonna be real mad.
But luckily, Emilia Perez, a horror movie for different reasons, has all the limelight. So,
all right. Thank you guys for watching.
Thank you guys. Listening. Leave a comment, do whatever you gotta do. We'll talk to you guys later.
Bye. Bye-bye. Friendly Neighborhood Filmmakers, signing off.